So what happens next? Jeremy, I think this is where you're going to go. What happens when that first bottleneck reaches the next bottleneck?
Well, you see things like Costco having no toilet paper, right? Bottled water, paper towels. You see the ways of life that we expect, the things that we just take for granted all of a sudden become evident, right? And then on the supplier side, I see it like a hamster wheel, right? Ben, you're an investor, and tastes change from one moment to the next. I read this morning that roller skates are hot again. Been seeing them around the streets a lot lately here in Santa Barbara, right? So I mean, we could be on a call in another few months, and writing letters in the mail is hot again, and we're talking about postal service. You needed to scale up their mail capacity, so it's so hard to predict the future. We all know that. But I think that what we're going to see infrastructure investment and improvement going in a substantial way for the foreseeable future. And it's going to, in hindsight, it's going to look like a long tail of the pandemic.
Right. Interesting. Well, let's talk more about what we think happens next. Jim, what are your thoughts about what happens next?
I think global trade there's still a lot of that moving on. And just as, at small package level, we talk a lot about containers, but there's never been more small package moving across border than is today. And I mean, just Asia, China and all the different players there are moving 1 billion packages a year from all the marketplaces. Everybody knows how to find Ali and Wish and eBay and Amazon. And so people, and there's not enough capacity there. You want to talk about a supply chain challenge. There's, you can't get enough lift to move it over. Stuff sits in China for a week trying to get to the US. And that's, with all the carriers, pretty significantly invested there. So, and that's a big part of what we talk a lot about, the containers of goods that are going to find their way into a warehouse. But I think there's stuff just coming across as small package at levels that's never existed before by my 20 years working on it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what it means for shippers. So Casey and Jeremy, when you talk to your customers on the shipper side, I'm sure one of the questions that they ask you is, what do I do? How do I make sure that my supply chain isn't disrupted? What do you tell them?
Well, Casey, you go for it.
Oh, I go first. The first thing I tell them is look, at the end of the day, and anytime you have a supply constraint like we're looking at on the shipping side, that drives your cost up. So just know that's going to happen. Using some examples, containers right now are to move a container across the Pacific is about 400% more costly than it was a year ago at this time. Similar cost increase within a full truckload from LA to New York. That is filtering into parcel spend. And so as shippers and frankly, as e-commerce consumers, which we all are, we're going to need to expect cost increases in that percentage of the product's cost that is tied to supply chain. And as shippers, they've got to get their mind around that. That's a really tough thing. Your budgets get blown up. Your ability to predict your costs and therefore your margins, they get blown up. And so you have some real imbalances that are caused on the cost side. Another thing that I'm hearing a lot from shippers, especially I heard it a lot during peak, is, well, how do I fix it? What do I do? And unfortunately for them, the answer is not as much as you would hope. The carriers, there's a lot they can do to help alleviate it in the future. But for the shippers, they can do some very good basic practices, which procurement has been recommending for years, having a secondary supplier that you always keep in play. We call it a multi-carrier play. Use softwares that support that. Jeremy's software does a wonderful job of that. There are some others out there that are also quite good. But you need to plan for a redundancy because you don't know which of your carriers is going to trailer cap you and put you in a position where now you'll take any price just so I can get it in time for Christmas, or in this case, get it in time for graduation or whatever the next event is going to be that's going to trip the supply chain disaster. Jeremy?
Yeah. Well, and you guys know I'm passionate about this subject because I wrote a book on it. But I think the single greatest risk to the independent merchant is the size and power of these massive marketplaces and the closed supply chains that they're building. that the independents cannot access unless they, sell their soul, right? If you say, yes, I will go all in on one of the major marketplace ecosystems, you can get their support, and that support is substantial now, all the way to the final mile, all the way to the doorstep from China, or in many cases, we think the stuff's being sold here and it's being sold from China. So I think the independent merchants need to really take seriously their relationship with the U.S. Postal Service, their relationship with their regional carriers, with 3PLs. The network of partners that they have in aggregate is their single biggest asset. And if they're using things like Casey's talking about, software and everything else to manage that, it becomes very sustainable for a small or mid-sized company to do that effectively. But if they're acting like tomorrow's going to be like yesterday, I think they're in store for a rude awakening in terms of just costs going to ceiling, because they don't have the right partnerships, or they're not in the right ecosystem.